right? Hey, Daniel, how you doing tonight?
Aaron,
Doing well?
how's it going? Will you dive in?
Yeah, I
Talk about
think we
some
should.
agile stuff?
Why not? I think so. Just before we went live, you were talking about your pet peeve, that agility scrum. I mean, gosh, anybody can do it. What
Yeah, yeah.
what do you mean by that?
So yeah, that's so it's my pet peeve because I think I've seen a rash of experts recently who kind of tell people they can't. Tell people, no, you're in a special circumstance. You're in an industry that can't move that quickly, that can't deploy that quickly, or you're building this kind of product, so you can't learn as quickly as other people can, and it drives me nuts because you know it's they're an expert and they're hindering that person from getting to experience this for themselves, getting that competitive advantage in their business. Um, by telling them it's not possible. So that's my big pet peeve at the moment is anyone can practice this, right? It's is it different in industry to industry? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I've seen it in construction, I've seen it in engineering, I've seen it in research, I've seen it in yeah, education, pretty much everything, highly regulated industries and completely unregulated industries. Um,
And what do you
Fact
mean
is,
exactly by it? Like Agile, Scrum, Kanban,
yeah.
Lean,
So
all of the
thank
above?
you. Well, yeah, there's a rabbit hole. Well, so let's say Scrum, right? Because this
Okay.
is what a lot of people say, and this is what a lot of people. This is what I've heard a lot of people saying. Well, Scrum says you have to have a releasable product in a sprint, which can be as long as a month,
Mhm.
right? People do it all over the place. Not only do they do it in less than a month, but a lot of places do it in less than a week,
Right.
right? And um, and so, like I said, it frustrates me that people say, no, 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 you can't do it in your industry. Yes, yes, you can. Now that may raise a different question. Does it give you
Okay.
a competitive advantage to do it in your industry? Um, you know, there are examples of doing construction. Could you
Hmm.
build a house with Scrum? Sure, absolutely, you could.
Yeah,
Does it give you a competitive advantage to build your house with Scrum? Probably not, right?
probably
There's
not.
a development going up near me,
Hmm.
and they're building, hundreds of houses. And I think there are five basic floor plans, and some minor modifications. Well, they're getting all their efficiency from building the same house over and over and over again, so they can offer the house at a lower price. And so,
Inventory
should they build it with
control.
Scrum? No, no. Why? What would it get you? If you're going to build a custom house that is specific to exactly your needs and you're willing to spend the money for it, well, then maybe Scrum, might give you some benefit there. So, so
Maybe
yeah,
on the inspection and adaptation in a custom house, yeah, I could see that.
yeah,
Competitive advantage? Not really. Advantage for the homeowner? Maybe. Maybe
yeah.
not. Yeah, I get where you're going with that. So, what is it, do you think, about the expert, or is it, excuse me, inside the company that people are saying, no, no, not here? Is it from the outside expert, inside
Uh,
the company? Where does that stem from?
oh, now I'll have to say controversial things.
Oh, good. Then maybe we'll get
Yeah,
people to
yeah, right.
watch. Yeah.
So, you know, I I always hesitate to play armchair psychologist, but so I'll speak broadly, as opposed to what any particular person's motivation for it is. Um, but there is definitely, a movement in the agile industry towards how do I sell to
Mhm.
people with large companies, who can have large contracts, right? How do I approach that from a sales standpoint? Tell them something that already exists in their frame of mind and their approach. And so if you say to them, um, Here's the deal. This is a completely different way of thinking about your business, and a different
Right.
the principles of what makes your business successful, chopping down bottom line, reducing your costs, focusing on efficiency, right? Those will let you succeed in an existing market with existing products that work in a way that you're already familiar with. But as soon as you want to push into a new space, those approaches to business won't work anymore. And now we have to use, this iterative and agile approach where learning is key, not productivity and efficiency, right? And you need to gain that learning before you can move into efficiency. Um, what you're asking them to do is change their entire mindset. And if they're like a C-level executive or a VP, they've spent decades gaining their success, and those decades may have been spent on that business model, on that efficiency and robustness of the business in order to, in order to do the work at a lower cost and succeed there. And so you might be telling them, hey, how you've succeeded for the past 20 years, 30 years, you're just going to have to set that aside for now and learn something completely new. Um, Now, I think that a lot of leaders got where they are because they're smart people, and there are a lot of them who are absolutely capable of that, right? But if we're talking on sheer percentages of sales,
Mhm.
is that the good bet? No. Compared to, I can tell you how to be agile without changing anything fundamental in your company, right? That's gonna be a more appealing sales pitch. And you see that. I mean, you see that in talks, in gatherings and agile conferences and stuff. How to talk to CEOs.
Mhm.
Well, they want to hear this. They want to hear how you're going to reduce their operating expense. They want to hear how you're going to.
Keep the
Maybe they do,
30% a year growth and
right?
whatever are their numbers already.
Right, right, and maybe they do, but is that going to get them the change that's really going to pay off for them that agile promises? No, no,
Right.
it's not. So
Yeah.
it's it always reminds me of car insurance.
Mhm.
This sounds like a tangent. I promise it's related. You know how every car insurance company says we can save you 15% on your car insurance when you switch to us?
Pretty much everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, and do you know why?
No, no, actually, I don't.
So what they're banking on is that you don't pay attention to your car insurance.
Mhm.
Right. So if you called up your insurance company right now and you said, "Hey, talk to me about my premium," they would talk to you about the policy that you set up 5 years ago when your car was just off the lot, and that's still the car you're insuring, even though you're 5 years later. So when you go to a new company, they're banking on the fact that you haven't paid any attention to your car insurance. And so they're going to insure the car you have now, not the car you had 5 years ago, which is going to be a lower premium. So you save 15% on your car insurance. And and so I promise this isn't a tangent. I'm tying it back in. That's what a lot of this, when we come in and we're gonna try Kanban, we're gonna try applying Scrum, we're gonna do value stream mapping, any of these other techniques where we're just gonna work within your existing system, basically. That's what's happening. That's people banking on the fact that you haven't paid enough attention to your processes. And so just by paying attention to your processes, you're going to get all these gains by chopping out things that made sense 5 years ago and don't make sense today. And then you go, wow, that's awesome, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it is awesome. That
Right.
might save you millions of dollars, and that's
Yeah.
great.
Depending on the scale. Right.
But if your goal of becoming more agile was to hit the market faster and get ahead of your competition,
Mhm.
that's not going to deliver on that goal, right?
So
And
I
if
have a
you're,
question.
yeah,
Do you think, regardless of process or even a no process, if we just say, here, have a look, it'll get better?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Maybe
I
by
mean,
10%?
no, there's like tons of caveats on that, right? Like, if you just look at it and go, wow, that sucks. Well, of
Ooh,
course it doesn't
bad.
get better. um, but if you take a real honest look at your process and say, what if this fits and what if it doesn't fit?
Hmm.
And take whatever actions come, just are
The
intuitive and
quick
make
wins.
sense. Sure, it's
Yeah.
going to get better. Absolutely.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I always like to tie it to things outside of like agile and business, right? It's like if you looked at your diet and looked at like, hey, how many times do you have a beer? How many times did you eat dessert this week? How many times did you, right? You know, how many times do you eat fast food as opposed to a home cooked meal?
Yeah.
Will your health and nutrition get better? Yeah, absolutely, because you're paying attention to it, right?
Sure.
It's the
Maybe just a
exact same.
weigh in. Like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah,
Went up? I should do something. Should
yeah,
maybe not have that next sip of wine.
right.
That makes sense. I
Yeah,
hear that. Bringing attention to something, the focus by itself, a smart person will see that and say, I can do something.
yeah.
Okay. Why do you think people don't do that? Why are they not aware? Why do they think what got them here will get them there? And they're not looking. What's with that?
Well,
You have
well, I
any
think you actually asked two different
hypothesis?
questions there.
Okay.
So I would so there is why are we not looking? And I think that is pretty easily and fairly answered to we get busy, right? Like we get busy. Our
Yeah.
days are really full. Most of us spend more than 8 hours a day on work,
Hmm.
right? And so if we filled up our entire day already, then where's the space for us just to sit back and watch what's happening, right? You look at your average, you know, well, really any employee, but let's say manager on up, and their calendars are booked, usually double booked all the way through,
Triple.
sometimes
Yeah.
triple booked.
Yeah.
Um, where do they have time to look at the process,
Sure.
right? And that's
To
now
breathe.
there's something cultural there. There's a bad habit to it that um, we feel like, well, the more important someone is, the more meetings they need to be in, the more they, right?
Mhm.
Whereas, I know that there are leaders out there that take the exact opposite approach, right? No, I need time to just sit back and reflect. And those are often the leaders that, write blogs and books about their successes.
That's fair. And they have time to write the book and the blog
They
and
do.
whatever
They
else
do.
because they
That-
find that time. I wonder if it's because in that busyness of business, there's actually so much time soaked up, like just spending it in weird, wasteful ways. And so if you just stop spending that wasteful time, you focus it in better directions.
yeah.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
part of it. And you're
Ironically,
saying it's like I'm I'm a manager. I need to be busy. That's what fulfills me as a person. Is it something like that? You think?
well, there's norms, right? Of what's expected. We have this idea of a person who manages or who leads a company and what does their day look like, and then we make it true,
Hmm.
right? Um, so yeah, you look
Perception
at
becomes reality. Something like that.
right, right. It becomes an ugly cycle. Now there's tons of really smart people talk about this, and to a certain degree, I'm just parroting. Like I have to admit that my expertise comes secondhand here, but there are tons of studies and tons of really, frankly, really intelligent work out there that talk about why that's happening. So
Okay.
there are people who talk about how there are leadership vacuums, right? Middle management ends up getting too involved in the work because of a lack of trust in the organization, and so they feel like, well, if there's not a manager inside that conversation, the frontline workers are going to mess it up. And so, nope, I need you in there. Well, because they're in there, they're not thinking about the operations. So then upper management has to dive into operations, and it just creates this upward vacuum.
Yeah.
And a really common recommendation there is create the vacuum the other way. You
Right.
know, if you're in upper management, start doing upper management work, start focusing on strategy, and you'll create a vacuum in operations. Well, who's going to fill that vacuum in operations? Well, the managers are going to start having to fill it because middle management, that is their job, is
Mhm.
to focus on that. And then when they start filling that, the only way they can fill that is if they start trusting and demanding demanding accountability out of the people doing the work, saying,
Mhm.
hey, I won't be here, so what do you need to be able to run with this without me being here? So I mean,
Hit
there's
me
that
up if
kind
you
of
need something. Otherwise, I'll be doing my job, not
yeah,
yours. Something like that.
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, right, that's exactly true. um, I know one of my favorite authors on this is David Marquette. He's wrote the book Turn the Ship Around, and he has his own consulting company that focuses on what they call intent-based leadership. But I mean, that's people talk about, well, can you do that in this environment or this environment or this environment? He did that on a U.S. Navy submarine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Say more about intent and intentional leadership.
well, so like in that context,
Any context. So this is,
sure.
we're maybe talking on behalf of Marquette, but what does this
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. So actually I really love the idea there because there's a fear that keeps us from empowering people and frankly just getting out of their business,
Mhm.
right? And it's a fear that if I'm not right there, do I know if it will get done properly? And I think it's a legitimate fear because if the people that you're leaving to do a certain type of work have never done it unsupervised before,
Mhm.
and they've always relied on you to do some of the thinking and safety checking, then yeah, if you create that, if you just leave completely, um, then there may be no one in that space with the knowledge to do that thing safely, to do it effectively, right? And obviously, on a submarine, safety is quite literally safety.
Yeah.
But if you're in a bank, right, safety might be about losing large amounts of money or falling out of
Mhm.
regulatory compliance.
Mhm.
Um, so so the mechanism that he talks about with intent is, instead of saying, I want you to do this, and here's how I want you to do it so it's done safely, or leaving, giving direction and saying bye, and just
Mhm.
hoping that the person does it safely, right? Which is
Mhm.
which is
Good luck. Be safe. I'll see you later.
right, which is frankly just can be irresponsible depending on
Uh-huh.
what the decision is. Um, he says, okay, I want you to tell me what your intent is to do, and then I'll ask questions back, right? So it's a helping strategy where someone says, well, I want to do this. I'm going to make this sale. I'm going to deploy this software, whatever it happens to be. And then
I
the
see.
person who used to make that decision says, okay, so tell me about your plan. What have you
Mhm.
done to address this security aspect? What have you done to address this regulation aspect? And I did this, I did this, I did this. Now, the first time you have that conversation, you have to ask a lot of questions. The second time, they come prepared for some of them, right? And as it goes more and more, you're validating that they are covering those bases so that now the work is done safely. And he offers this whole ladder of leadership where it starts way, way, way down, low level of autonomy. If it was, I want you to do this, it becomes, you start asking questions about, what do you think about it? you know what do you see out here? Just get them involved in the conversation, and eventually it starts moving to, well, what would you do if you were in my place? Right, don't worry, I'll hold the decision, but
Mhm.
what would you do? Let's get you
Yeah.
start thinking about that. And then it keeps progressing up and up and up until eventually you get to the point where they got it. Don't worry
Mhm.
about it. And then you can really be free of those decisions.
It reminds me of this concept of gradual release of responsibility. And Jean Tabeka would talk about these studies in psychology where if you tell people what to do, you back off, they've actually lost the ability to think for themselves. So when you
Yeah.
say you're empowered, do it, they actually can't. So you have to play it out slowly, which
Yeah.
I think is also child development, right? You,
Yeah.
as they pick up more and more, you give them more and more
Yeah.
until they're self-capable. And it's a coaching stance too, right?
Yeah.
Self-generating, self-control, all of that. So, wow, I really like this. So it's not me saying this is my intention, like a commander's intent, which is
Right.
what I was thinking of since he comes out of the military. Here's the battle plan and the intent, but it's saying, what do you intend?
Yeah.
And how are you hitting that intention and maybe coaxing that back out?
And I love sharing this not just with hierarchical leaders, but what about technical leaders? What about product leaders?
Mm-hmm.
How do you, if you're an architect in an organization, and here I mean like architect, like solution architecting as opposed to, or enterprise architect as opposed to like a building architect, um, and you want people on teams to make sound architecture decisions, you can use the same technique when they come to you and say, they can come to you and say, here's what we would do. Here's what we're
Mm-hmm.
thinking. We sat down, we talked about it. Here's our solution. You say, okay, where does that data live?
Right.
Uh, we didn't think about that. Hold on. Let's come back to you.
Yeah.
How
Wait
do
a
you account
sec.
for the security?
Uh-huh.
What if someone tries to attack on this front? All those different things, right? You can take the exact same approach with technical leadership. You can take it with product leadership. You can get people to think about their customers that way. Um, product owners coming in, and instead of, I see sometimes two different forms of product ownership. One where it's very directive. I'm going to give you the tasks I want you to do, and then the team's like, fine, whatever, I'll do this. And
Mm-hmm.
people who want more authority leave, and people who are there just become more and more dependent on that product owner. Well, why don't you give me stuff faster? This is your fault we don't work fast enough,
Right.
right? Or sometimes we see the way opposite, where the product owner goes, I don't know what to do. Like, I have to deliver this project. There you go. You're empowered. Do it.
Yeah. It's all priority. This is
Right.
what I've been told. No, I'm telling you.
Yep.
So yeah.
And then you get to, so I think the best product owners are the ones who go, okay, I'm gonna keep the value perspective. I'm gonna keep the customer's voice in this conversation. And I'm going to hold that space while you work through a solution. So here's the thing we're trying to accomplish. In our product, I want a user to be able to do X.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to 10 different users. I can speak, about those discussions. I can bring some of them in for you if you want to have that conversation. Um, Talk to me about how you might solve it. Well, what if we did this? That sounds really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I like this aspect of it, but what about this customer who that doesn't work for because they're on this type of account, or they're, whatever, they're in this country and they can't get online all the time. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So we have to account for that too over here. Right. So it's the same thing happening. We intend to do this to solve the problem. Okay, let me reflect back what I'm thinking from a customer standpoint. And then gradually over time, you get that team thinking about the customer. Okay, we're going to have to account for this. We have this group of customers here. They have these constraints. This type of person is going to have this constraint. So here's how we handle that. And this person gets a sorry email because they're just not in our demographic for this particular feature. And then over time, the team just does that as part of their solutioning process.
Yeah. I wonder about something like unintended consequences or the things you just don't know you don't know.
Sure.
I think that's where Scrum could come in handy, or something that you're getting rapid feedback. So you say, here's our intention, here's our assumptions, but we're going in this direction for solution, and then getting feedback against some of those assumptions, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And
But
well, I think the thing with that is all decisions are made by humans, right? So if the person who's going to make the decision anyway doesn't think to ask,
Mhm.
then they were just as much at risk of making that bad decision as the people they've now empowered, right? In fact, you probably have less risk because that was one person. Now we have maybe 10 people.
Thinking and asking.
So you have 10 times more likelihood of finding it out ahead of time. And then if you still don't find it out,
Mhm.
yeah, then that was probably fairly unknowable, and then, like you said, of course, create safety by fast feedback loops, approaching those challenges iteratively, incrementally, and making sure you're getting effective feedback so you discover what you didn't know before.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. So we have this intention, releasing that responsibility so people can handle it, and making people aware, I guess. Just
Yeah.
trying to take the busyness out of business, helping people realize business is personal, right? It's all human relationship. Okay, I'm very curious. I always wonder about this. Why is iterating and getting feedback so difficult? So people just let the data fly by, and even if they look at it, they give one shot at it, move on.
Are
Why
you,
is that so? Because you
are you
can
asking
just
my
read the
opinion on
Scrum guide. Yes,
that?
I am. We can read the Scrum guide. It's like, oh, feedback, iterating,
Yeah.
okay, and then nobody does it.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that so hard to double back, to look at something, to get feedback? Is it because we don't like it? Yeah, I'm asking you to speculate. But does this go back to why the expert can say, oh no, this is going to be hard for you?
Maybe. Well, so all right, so there's the cynic in me, that goes back to just what our expectations of success look like, right? Why does I can point to the same things of like, why does hubris take you so far
Yeah, yeah,
in a
good
career?
question. Right.
Because sometimes looking like gets you a lot farther than knowing.
Yeah,
And
confidence.
so this is a really cynical answer. I suspect I could come up with some less cynical answers, but
Well, I put you on the spot.
there is something to it that if we look at the fact that hubris and feeling certain can take you really far, how does that play out in whether or not you take the feedback, whether or not you learn? Well, hubris is all about ignoring learning and saying, I substitute my idea of reality over whatever reality is actually happening, right? And I'm going to convince you that what I say is more valid than reality. Um, and right, so there's no place for learning because it sounds awful to say, but it is. It's a con game. Like hubris is a con game. Um,
Confidence. It's
yes,
that's
yes,
it.
yes. In the
Exactly.
pure sense, it's a
Yeah.
confidence game, and so to admit that I might not know takes away the foundation
Hmm.
of that confidence game, and so if that's become normalized, if it's and you can tell it's become normalized if you ask a question like, how do you know that that's right? And you get answers like, well, it better be right because we just spent $2 million on it, right? Now you know that it's been normalized, that if it wasn't right, you can be sure someone's going to make it look like it was right
Hmm.
because you have to sustain that, right? It better be. So I guess we'll make it look that way. Um, so I think, I mean, that's a part of it, right? Is there a place for learning inside the culture? And the only way that there's a place for learning is if being wrong is not a negative character trait, right? If you don't look, that person's always right, that person's always got the right answer, that person always knows what to do, right? We're human beings. I guarantee you that person doesn't always have the answer and doesn't always know what to do and is wrong a lot of times. So if that's the story that's being told, then you don't have a space for learning inside of the culture. And
Hmm.
so you can get as much feedback as you want, but you'll never use it.
You'll never use it. It's
Yeah.
discounted because maybe it starts to feed my own imposter syndrome, unwind my own psychological safety
Yeah.
and take away my confidence. So I need to find things to build that up.
Yeah.
Wouldn't learning itself help build that up?
Yeah. I guess that's the ironic thing, right?
Right. I've heard when you're trying to hold up the mirror, drop the hammer and the nail. So this goes back to becoming aware,
Yeah.
like being able to clearly see what's being reflected and then do something about it and not say, I'm nailing it because, or hammering because we spent 2 million.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite the trait to be able to hold up the mirror. Do you have any tips on how to do that? On how to unload it and without hubris say these are the observations?
So I think the first thing that you have to do. So if I say, yeah, I realize everything I've said in the past couple minutes is pretty harsh on people, and I would start by tempering it and saying that these are not characteristics of people, right? If you look at your own actions, you go, "Oh my God, I do that." That doesn't make you a bad person or or a fraud, or anything else. Um, there are a lot of systemic things that say you will succeed if you do this, right? And um, so wrapped into that, I think if you're reflecting on yourself and you're going, man, I feel that way, and I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to feel like I'm constantly putting up this image of I know what I'm doing. Because you talk to people who are in this situation, most of them aren't happy about it. They don't like the fact that they always have to seem like they have the answer. That's incredibly taxing.
Yeah,
Um,
stressful.
so
Adds to the
if you watch,
busyness.
say one
Pardon?
more time.
I would think adds to the busyness.
Oh
I've got to
yeah,
always stay ahead, know I'm
yeah,
right, stay ahead of that.
yeah.
Adds to the stress. Now I've got all this cortisol going in my system, just
Yeah.
starting to spin out of control. Nobody likes
So,
that, for sure.
so I think the very first thing is if someone's watching this video and they go, man, I think that's me. What do I want to do about it? I I actually think it's really important for the first step to be kind to yourself and don't beat yourself up
Hmm.
about it. And I know that seems really touchy feely and it doesn't feel like oh, here's like a thing I'm gonna do, but it's important to be okay with it and acknowledge that it's a really normal thing and and it doesn't make you a bad person, and then ask yourself, you know how much safety do I really have?
Hmm.
How A lot of people who are in this position, there are expectations upon them and they don't necessarily feel safe to shed those expectations or to go against them. And you know and so I think you have to be real with yourself about how much safety do you have to come out and go, I don't know the answer, right? And then when you do that, you can start to find places where you can start saying, I don't know,
Hmm.
right? And it really is as liberating as it's the liberating thing is when you start doing that. When we teach classes to leaders, one of the exercises I love to do is uh, bef- before we get into like coaching techniques and basically helping people solve their problems without solving it for them, we do an exercise where everyone just needs to walk up to someone, and if let's say we were doing it, I would ask you a question. Doesn't matter if you know the answer or not. Your only response is I don't know, and then you ask me a question, and
That's
my
great.
only valid response is I don't know.
How does this activity work, Daniel?
I don't know. No, sorry.
No, that's
I
it.
didn't
We're
know if you
doing
were
it.
asking as a
Okay.
joke or if you were
Yes. No, no,
asking that
no.
seriously.
I want to just try this activity for a second. Okay. Now
Oh
you
yeah.
ask me something.
Yeah, so let me ask you, how many species of blue jays are there in North America?
Oh, I honestly don't know.
Then you ask me a question.
Okay. Um, how many houses are they building in the development down the street from you?
I don't know. So so then we would just go and we find another pair of people and we do the same thing. And it's funny when people do this, especially people who are in leadership positions who are always expected to know the answer. The first couple passes, a lot of times they try to answer. Like the question you'd ask me, maybe I'd say, well, I would guess there are probably about 200 over there, and there's space for about 10 times that many.
Mhm.
You're like, no, that's not a valid answer. The only valid answer is I don't know. Like, but I think I have it. That's not the point of this exercise.
Yeah.
So the first couple times they do that, and then usually after the fifth or sixth pairing, it's impossible to get them to stop because it's so liberating to not have to have the answer for once.
To be honest, when I'm just scanning how I feel right now, my heart's beating a little faster. I feel a little anxious, but excited to just be able to say, I don't know. I don't know. It's a little thrilling, actually.
Yeah, it's
It's
nice,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
And I also think it might help with self-care because you were talking about talking to yourself and not beating yourself up, right? Honestly, I'm a little guilty of that. I'm like, oh, dummy. But when I find myself doing that, then I ask myself, which is super weird, how does that serve you, Aaron? And start talking to myself about why I am in this negative self-talk. And I find it's a good way out.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps me be a little bit more willing to ask other people when they're doing that negative self-talk out loud, and then just ask, how is that serving you? Because I do it to myself. It's like I have this own internal practice, and people usually just stop stunned. I'm like, it doesn't. It doesn't help at all.
that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. I find that it's kind of helpful, and it goes back into thinking about. I had conversations with Tara Swanson about building psychological safety, Ahmed Ave about conscious or conscientious coaching. And it
Hmm.
always seems to come down to be aware. Be aware of yourself, the environment, others, uh, which might help with that sense of reality. Instead of putting that facade of confidence and ignoring data, whatever else, you just start looking around at what's actually around you. Maybe
Yeah.
now we can do something. I don't
Well, I think you're exactly in the right direction, right? As soon as you find a space to say, I don't know, then just what you're saying, right? Well, now maybe we can do something, right?
know. Mm-hmm.
So because because then the people that you're working with can also say, well, we don't know either. Okay, great. Now we don't know. What do we want to do about that? Oh, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could ask someone? Wouldn't it be nice if we could discover it? Yeah, it would be nice. What
Mm-hmm.
do we need to discover? Maybe I don't know that either, right? And that
Yeah.
leads me down another, um, and that's how real problems are solved, right? That's how people make real breakthroughs. Is we sit down, we realize what we do and don't know, and then we start going, okay, what is it important to learn? How am I going to learn that? How now I want the data. It's not a question of accepting the data. I want that data and that feedback now. And then I suppose that gets back to what you mentioned a number of minutes ago, right? That the learning is the cure for the feeling that I don't know, right? This feeling that
Yeah.
I have to put up an air of confidence, because I'm nervous, about not being all knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Like
right?
Karnak,
It's all by
something.
learning. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting. And maybe that building that safety, um, strength in numbers sort of thing.
yeah,
When you look around, somebody might say, I know. Well, great. Tell me.
yeah,
But if we all start looking around and say, I don't know, there should be some, I don't know, feeling of relief in that, I would imagine. That,
yeah,
okay, how do we pursue this? How do we go find this and get some answers here, get some
yeah,
feedback, learn, grow?
yeah.
Oh, how fascinating, Daniel. I like this conversation quite a bit. Where should we
The-
take it from here?
well, I have to throw this other thing on just because I love it. It's like the counterpart to it, because
Okay.
now that you admit that you don't know, and then we discovered that no one knows, um, there's now where do you go from there? And there's a phrase I'm borrowing from someone from an old teacher that I had, um, that he used to say, "Well, I hope I'm good," right? And I loved it because it was like, I have skills here, right? You didn't get to where you got to because you don't know anything,
Right.
right? You know a lot and you have a lot of skills. You are probably one of the best people to be in this situation when no one knows, right? And the people that you've surrounded yourself, if you've got a good team around you, these are the people you want with you when you don't know. So, so don't kind of lead into despair then because like, we don't know. I guess we're out of luck. No,
Oh,
these are the
wow.
best people around
Yeah.
to be in that situation with. So, and does that mean that you'll have the answer? Maybe not, right? And that gets back to that. Well, I hope I'm good, and then let's acknowledge what we have, acknowledge what we don't have, and then start walking forward. So I think
Sure.
that's the important cap to that is it doesn't end there. It just opens you to be able to actually take the steps that you need to learn.
Hmm. Sure. That admit there's something I don't know means there's something I have to learn to find,
Yeah.
and I am good, right? I have the skills. I'm equipped
Yeah.
to investigate and find out, even if it's through trial and error. I think
Absolutely.
it's like playing a game. First time you play some video game, there's a ton you don't know. And
Right.
you just keep running into walls, picking things up, putting it down. But eventually you learn. As long as you know how to play any video game, you start to learn how to play this one
Yeah.
and progress and level up and all that stuff. So
we
need some
I mean
time.
that's the amazing thing about like humans. What are we ultimately designed to do? Learn things.
Yes. That
That's
self-aware
ultimately what
piece.
we are designed to do. We recognize patterns and learn how to adapt to those patterns.
Right.
So yeah, you just by being a human being, you are perfectly suited to being in
Oh,
a situation where you don't know. So
pop my collar. Lucky me.
exactly.
I'm human. I got to go find things out now. Actually, it's really what I love about these live streams, how much I learn by talking with people like you, Daniel. And I really appreciate this conversation. And we wrap up somewhere around 50, and we're at 43 now.
Yeah.
And I always like to leave the guest, leave you, Daniel, with any wrap up, final thoughts, summary, conclusion. Help me in this. It's all on
Oh
you.
man. I always like to be really optimistic. Which you might not get from this conversation. There's been a lot of ranting in this conversation, but we did
How
decide
does
to
that
start
serve
it
you?
with a pet
I feel
peeve.
like I feel like you're being a little hard on yourself there, Daniel. What
That
how does that help? How
that
does
may
that
be
help
true.
you?
It helps get me excited to be optimistic.
I gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
and
Let's hear that.
so yeah. Um, when we go into work, people have good days and bad days. They have high motivation days and low motivation days. But every single person is in there to 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 do something good, right? To be the best at whatever they do. A developer, a tester, a chemical engineer, um, a director of a department, a VP. Every single one of those people wants to be good at their job. They, the VP wants to be successful. Wants whatever he's VP over to to succeed in the company. He wants to be viewed as a success by his peers. He wants the people who work for him to be happy and to in turn be successful. Um, and I think it's really important when we talk about changing organizations to a new way of working, it's really easy to think of certain people in stereotypes. To
Mhm.
think of a lazy developer, the tyrant manager, those don't exist. Like everyone has a little bit of that archetype in them that might come out in their worst times. That person doesn't exist. There is no
Mhm.
manager that's just there to be a tyrant.
Mhm.
They're doing something because they actually think it's going to help them succeed. And so whether you're looking at other people and you look at someone else and go, hey, they're that right, they're that person that's playing the confidence game, or we're looking at ourselves and seeing that. I think it's really important to remember that everyone's trying to be a good person. Everyone's trying to succeed, and whatever they're doing is because they think it's going to lead to success. And so don't lose. I say that to say, like, don't lose confidence in people. These, like I said, my pet peeve was when these experts come in and say, well, you can't. And that drives me nuts because, yeah, you can. Every single person out there should know that if they want to practice Scrum, practice Kanban, run the best shop that anyone's ever seen, yeah, they can absolutely do that. And so it drives me nuts when people limit them. Um, yeah, that's always the thing I like to harp on. People are good people. They have a lot of potential. Help them
Yeah,
see it.
I love that, Daniel. And just the power of being human allows you access to that.
Yeah.
Super cool. Well, thanks, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks. This was a lot of fun doing this. Thank you for inviting me on.
You're welcome. And I just ended the stream.